Support comes from Sunday Morning Cafe, presenting Resilience and Creativity, a concert and interview with Royce Martin, creator of Swag Time, and resilience researcher Dr. Tom Wagner on August 2nd, sundaymorningcafe.com.
From the St. Louis Public Radio Newsroom, this is The Gateway. It's Wednesday, July 29th. I'm Abby Larico. A couple previously living in Overland was killed weeks after they reunited in Guatemala. He'd been deported. She left to keep her family together. Now, Overland's mayor is speaking out about the federal enforcement action preceding their deaths.
Just a loss of local control, loss of having a voice in how our residents are treated, and it's just a difficult situation to figure out.
Plus, later on The Gateway, Congressman Wesley Bell and former Congresswoman Cori Bush are once again running against each other for Missouri's 1st Congressional District. And the result could be a major sign of where the Democratic Party is heading.
With Cori Bush, I think it is a bigger story if she wins, because it kind of dovetails into this narrative from New York and Colorado and says, gosh, we're even seeing that in Missouri as well.
St. Louis Public Radio's Jason Rosenbaum breaks down the nationally watched stakes of the Bush-Bell showdown. Overland residents Nixon Perez Paz and Glendy Gonzalez de la Cruz were shot and killed in Guatemala last week, shortly after Glendy self-deported amid an ongoing asylum case to join her husband, who was deported by ICE last April. Their 14-month-old daughter was found beside their bodies. St. Louis Public Radio's Brian Munoz has been reporting this story and spoke with Overland Mayor Marty Little yesterday about federal immigration enforcement, the couple's brutal killings, and the mayor's reaction to the news.
Any news that starts like that is tough to hear. There's bad news around the world every day, but it just hits a little bit harder when it's closer to home. And anytime I hear an Overland resident or former Overland resident be in this situation, it's tough. I didn't learn about this until I saw some of the news reports, because it spread pretty quickly once the word got out. So we just had to do some research and know exactly what our involvement was, what the situation was. Now we've got a pretty decent grasp as to what's going on there.
How does this situation shape the way that you think about federal immigration enforcement and the impact that it has on your local community?
Seeing the end result here should put everybody in perspective as to what this situation is. To know that, somebody's here, status notwithstanding, they might be here for a reason, and that if there's an impact here that would, cause bodily harm to them or ultimately death in this situation.
What, if any, communication has ICE or Department of Homeland Security had with you or other folks in the city to give you a heads up, hey, we're going to be doing some work in your community?
We know what's going on in our community to the best of our ability. That's why we have 100 employees, about 50 people in the police department between staff and officers. So everything that transpires with them is off record. We've instituted, body cams, so that way everything's clear, not just what people say, but how they say it, and there's accountability there. In these situations, again, to the best of our knowledge, we were not notified whatsoever before, during, after.
When thinking about Nixon and Glendy, what would you say to their 3 kids about the Overland community that their parents once called home?
First is the obvious. Sorry that this situation led to what happened. I lost a parent fairly young myself. It's not easy, and I hope that family can come together and they can console and grieve, and because there's no turning back time. Unfortunately, I wish that was the case. It's just not the case. And to remember their parents and what they stood for and build a better life for them than current generations of their parents' age.
In your opinion, where do we go from here?
I think the push for local control is important. Push for accountability at every level for police actions. I think the country, is a difficult one too, needs to look at immigration. Whether people feel one way or another, I think the knowledge level, or at least the legal knowledge level, isn't there. Everybody who's either, I can't say everybody, but a lot of folks who are pro-immigration or anti-immigration, if you ask them what it takes to become a citizen, I would venture to say that a very small percentage of them know what that process even looks like and how much that's changed recently. So I personally don't feel it should be an overnight, you want to move here, you're in, nothing else required. I don't know if a whole lot of people feel that way. But I think the process needs to be better understood. I think it needs to allow for the folks who have a strong need to be here, which I think what this situation was. I think we need to, understand that our country and our local area even are attractive to other people. There's a reason they want to be here. I think that should be celebrated. I think the different perspectives should be celebrated. I think, when you drive down the main thoroughfares of Overland, there's probably more diversity than you see most everywhere else in town between the Hispanic, white, and Black communities. And we get along very well. Every city has their issues, but we're trying to make that work.
That was Overland Mayor Marty Little speaking to St. Louis Public Radio's Brian Munoz. You can read more of their conversation at stlpr.org. After yesterday's Gateway was released, in which we reported the story of what happened to Nixon and Glendy, we got a statement from ICE. In it, a spokesperson cites 2 drunk driving convictions that do not appear on Perez Paz's Missouri court records, as well as an open container violation from Florida 16 years ago that was never prosecuted. The statement says, quote, "Since day one, DHS law enforcement has been delivering on President Trump's promise to the American people to arrest and deport criminal illegal aliens, including murderers, rapists, pedophiles, gang members, and terrorists." And the statement goes on to say officers remain, quote, "committed to removing criminal aliens from our communities." St. Louis Mayor Kara Spencer is traveling to Mexico City today to attend a forum on how to be more welcoming to migrants and refugees. The Mayors of the Americas Task Force on Migration brings together mayors from countries including Mexico, Uruguay, Chile, and Colombia. They'll talk about things like how to work with businesses to create job opportunities for migrants and dismantle barriers to entering the workforce, like language requirements. The city's 2-year-old Office of New Americans is working to make St. Louis a model welcoming city. According to a city press release, Spencer will be the only mayor representing the U.S. at the forum. It also says the trip will not be on the taxpayers' dime. Spencer expects to return to St. Louis Sunday. The city of St. Louis has received nearly $3 million from the Federal Emergency Management Agency to help continue disaster case management for tornado survivors. STLPR's Andrea Henderson reports.
St. Louis Mayor Kara Spencer met with lawmakers and federal agencies in Washington, D.C. last month to request more federal funding. The city submitted its original disaster case management funding request to FEMA last September and another request along with other disaster-related services in November. The federal funding is set to begin August 1st. Julian Nix is the city's chief recovery officer.
Here, the city has invested about $3 million directly into disaster case management and disaster case work. That funding was set to run out in August, and so this was a critical milestone for us to hit in securing this funding for the next year.
Nix says people who need case management can still apply. I'm Andrea Henderson, St. Louis Public Radio.
It's getting harder to get away with insisting on calling it St. Louis Bread Co., as Panera is moving its corporate headquarters from St. Louis County to the Boston area. According to an internal memo sent to employees this week, the company will relocate to Weston, Massachusetts in July of 2027 as part of its long-term growth strategy. Panera says it will keep a support center in St. Louis, but many local and remote employees will be asked to relocate. Panera was founded in St. Louis County in 1987 and opened its first store in Kirkwood under the name St. Louis Bread Company. The name officially did change to Panera 10 years later, and there are now more than 2,200 locations in the U.S. and Canada. A museum in the childhood home of Miles Davis is celebrating what would have been his 100th birthday by collecting stories of people who knew him. As St. Louis Public Radio's Chad Davis reports, the project has received submissions from former collaborators.
House of Miles East St. Louis launched its project this year. Museum leaders are collecting stories, photos, audio recordings, and more from people who knew Miles Davis. Some of the submissions come from people who grew up near Davis and have memories of him at the house. Others are from former collaborators. Jason Miles is a keyboardist and producer who worked on 3 albums with Davis. He shared the story of how they first met in New York City in 1986, leading to the recording of the album Tutu.
My life was changed by it. So many times you're the only one that realizes it until here I am now at 75, and Miles has been gone for 34 years or something like that.
The museum will collect stories throughout the year. I'm Chad Davis, St. Louis Public Radio.
Here's one to take to your next HOA meeting. Turns out lazy gardening might be doing just the right kind of work to create a perfect habitat for bees. STLPR's Kate Grumke reports on new local research on messy gardens.
A group of scientists wanted to know how St. Louisans could create gardens that bees would love. So they looked at observations from Shutterbee, a local citizen science project that photographed thousands of bees in the St. Louis region. They found that gardening for bees isn't only about planting flowers, says Webster University professor Nicole Miller-Strutman.
Maybe don't clean up quite so much. Keep those leaves. Don't cut back everything every year. Most bees spend most of their time in the ground or in stems.
And Miller-Strutman says it's always a good idea to go with native plants. I'm Kate Grumke, St. Louis Public Radio.
Covering the people and issues on the Missouri August primary ballot now, including a candidate for state senate in the 16th district who says it was a big mistake for the Missouri legislature to hear only one bill last year pertaining to data centers. That bill, by the way, didn't even make it out of committee. STLPR's Jonathan Ahl reports.
Republican State Representative Don Mayhew from Crocker is seeking his party's nomination for the 16th Senate District, which includes Rolla. He wanted Governor Mike Kehoe to call a special session to talk about regulations on data centers. Mayhew says open discussion on such an important issue is critical.
Where folks can come in and express their opinions one way or the other. We can get the experts to sit in front of us and talk to us about it, and then people can make a decision based on an informed position.
Mayhew was a guest on Politically Speaking. His opponents in the August 4th primary include State Representative Bill Hardwick and former Representative Hannah Kelly. Incumbent Justin Brown reached his term limits for the seat. In Rolla, I'm Jonathan Ahl, St. Louis Public Radio.
Congressman Wesley Bell and former Congresswoman Cori Bush are once again going head-to-head in the Democratic primary contest to represent Missouri's 1st congressional district. And as St. Louis Public Radio's Jason Rosenbaum reports, the result could show how Democrats want their leaders to fight Donald Trump in the last 2 years of his presidency.
Bell defeated Bush 2 years ago in one of the most expensive primary elections in American history. His core message, among other things, was that Bush was too much of a progressive lightning rod to be an effective legislator for the St. Louis region, and that he could build consensus to boost a place that struggled for years with decline. During a campaign stop last week in Ferguson, Bell reiterated that he would work as hard as he can in Congress to prevent St. Louis from, quote, dying a slow death.
But I also believe this region is a sleeping giant. And it's time to wake it up. We need to start bringing industry back here. We need to start bringing families back here. We can talk about the divisiveness and the division all we want, but folks want to hear about a vision for this region.
But Bush contends that St. Louis needs more than just collaboration. It needs urgency. At a press conference this month at the Service Employees International Union offices in St. Louis, Bush said she would have been more aggressive at pushing President Donald Trump to provide funds to help St. Louis recover from last year's deadly tornado. She also promised to continue her criticism of Israel's actions in Gaza, advocacy that compelled groups like the American Israel Public Affairs Committee to spend millions of dollars against her.
We're seeing investment in bombs overseas, billions spent on war abroad, while our communities right here suffer from a lack of funding and essential programs and suffer from because some that serve in our positions of power don't exactly know how to do the job.
The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is unquestionably affecting the 1st District's campaign dynamics. Polls show that Democratic voters have soured on Israel since 2024, which could be why congressional candidates critical of that country prevailed in places like New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Colorado. Bush backers like former New York Congressman Jamal Bowman say that St. Louis should follow in a similar direction.
When you look at poll after poll, the majority of American people do not want their tax money going to war. They want it coming to their communities for childcare and health care and education and housing.
But polling also shows that black voters, who make up a plurality of the 1st District, do not see the United States' support of Israel as a major priority. That could be why Bell and his supportive political action committees don't mention Israel in their advertisements, but instead question Bush's Democratic credentials or her campaign finance filings. Bell's supporters, like former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi of California, are instead honing in on his advocacy against Donald Trump's agenda, particularly the GOP president's immigration policies and his war in Iran.
And he brings his experience as a prosecutor to the Congress, and people look to him for guidance on what the best approach is.
University of Missouri St. Louis political science professor Anita Mannion says Bell's incumbency and money advantage should give him an edge, at least on paper. But she says the fact that Pelosi came to St. Louis County last week to campaign for Bell probably means the race could be tight.
He brought in the big guns there. And so with Cori Bush, I think it is a bigger story if she wins, because it kind of dovetails into this narrative from New York and Colorado and says, gosh, we're even seeing that in Missouri as well.
Whoever prevails in the 1st District Democratic primary will be heavily favored to win in November. I'm Jason Rosenbaum, St. Louis Public Radio.
Our Fred Ehrlich edited that piece. You can find more coverage of the August 4th primary election at stlpr.org. The Gateway is a production of St. Louis Public Radio, a listener-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis. Music by Ryan McNeely of Adult Fur. I'm Abby Larico, and from the St. Louis Public Radio newsroom, thanks for listening to The Gateway.